Hello, this is Philip with Titanic Animations, and today I'm going to be giving sort of like a quick little tutorial. There was a user, Jet Turtle, I believe, on my Discord a couple of days back, who was having a particular problem. They were attempting, let me just get rid of the default cube. They were having a problem where they had their model of whatever they were trying to do, and it was an ocean scene, so obviously they had a plane and they had it in here. And go away, CC cleaner. Okay, so let me just slap a environment texture in, and let me load in just a typical daylight HDRI. Let me swap over into shader view. And they were having sort of a problem where you can notice the edge of the plane. So what I suggested that they do is pretty simple, actually. Instead of having a square, because when you have a, let me just go back a second. When you have a square, you're always going to have edges that are meeting each other along with this just flat line. And if you have your camera at any angle whatsoever, you're going to be able to see those edges, and Blender is going to be able to detect them very easily in the render. So what I suggested for Jet Turtle to do is actually just to add a circle. So for right now, I'm going to just, I have the default circle here. I'm just going to extrude it. And then M to merge. I'm just going to merge it at the center. And then deselect everything. Select the outer edge. I'm going to extrude it again. And then I'm just going to scale this way, way up, just like I did the plane that was just here. Just going to make it huge. And you can see the render distance clipping right there. We'll take care of that in a second. But now you'll notice you can't really see where edges are meeting up with each other anymore. And this is still like, if you have a box here to represent a ship or anything that you're wanting to make an animation of, move it up. This is with the camera pulled pretty far away, and you can tell there's basically no edge meetup lines anymore. And it's because it's now circular. So when you're dealing with a large scene like an ocean, you never want to have a square. Anything with a sharp 90-degree edge on it is going to be horrible for your horizon, because then you're going to be able to see the horizon, and you don't want to be able to see the horizon. You just want a nice clean line along the top. So the next thing, the render distance. As you can see, I don't know why you would ever need to pull your camera out this far, but in case you ever did, you can come into the view. You can see the camera clipping, which if I zoom in and then keep zooming in right about there, it's set to 0.01 meters. So if anything gets closer to the camera than 0.01 meters, it's going to start clipping it or rendering it as invisible right where the camera boundary is. So just to showcase that again, let me move the camera to right here, select the camera, and then if I just start moving in, you'll start seeing the, yeah, oh boy, move it one more time because my mouse had a conniption fit. You see this line right here where like there should be a wall right here, but it's not. And that's because of the camera clipping distance. But it's the same thing for far away. Like if you're wanting to do a shot like this, all of a sudden you can't see all of the ocean in the background. You can't see your object in the background. And your render distance is set on 1,000 meters. So if you just bump it up to, let's say, 2,000, it's going to not do anything right now. I'm just going to bump this because this is a pretty large scene. I'm going to bump it to 5,000 in the viewport right here, which you can access this by just hitting the N key on your keyboard and then hitting view. But with your camera selected, click on the camera. And there, again, the clipping for the camera is set to 0.1 and 100 meters. So if you bump that up to 1,000 meters, all of a sudden, when you're in your viewport, you can see. Or when you're in your camera view, you can see everything that was just invisible. The last thing, really, let me put this right here because I'm about to mess with the horizon. If you're like me and you use HDRIs a lot, you'll notice that a lot of HDRIs, if I zoom out, are taken in a very nice landscape, and most of them have very nice and usable skies. But then when you come into camera view, you have land masses above your horizon, and you don't really want that in an ocean. So I'm just going to go into the shader editor, go into the world. I'm going to get rid of that sidebar because I don't need it. And I already have my HDRI loaded in as an environment texture. There's my background node, and there's the world output node. But what I need is a mapping node. Put that right there. And then a texture coordinate node. Put that right there. And I can just do generated to vector, vector to vector. And now, if I mess with these locations, it's going to change the overall placement of the HDRI itself. So Z in Blender, or Z, is up and down. So if you click just once to move the orientation up by 0.1 meters, you'll see that everything that we were just staring at landmass wise went below the horizon. We do have a little bit of a problem right here where you can still see a mountain range. So if you just click one more time, all of a sudden, now you have a completely clean sky with a nice sun for providing lighting. And as long as you don't have the camera pointed at an angle of like this where you can actually see past the horizon, all you really have to do is just keep scaling the ocean up over and over and over again. But by this point, if I come into orthographic view and get rid of this, this is a huge object. This is probably somewhere around 2 or 3 kilometers forth, like in diameter. It's obnoxiously huge. And if I zoom in and just select the object that we have standing in here for our ship, and I do like a full 360, you can see that there's nothing on the horizon that you can tell is there anymore. But if I go under the plane, all of that stuff is still there. It's just hidden beneath the horizon. And the last thing that I wanted to address with Jet Turtle and a few others on my Discord was just the basic ocean. So I like to do things where they render out as quickly as possible. Right now I'm using Eevee. This does work in Eevee, but it also works very well in cycles. So instead of doing what most people do and creating kind of like add a plane here and scale it up, what most people do, and even Hollywood Effects Studios do, what they do is they have a proxy ocean here, and what most people do is they come over and they have an ocean modifier set up on it, and there's the size of your proxy ocean. I'm just going to delete that because I'm not going to be using it. And that is where all of your high poly ocean is. And if you're doing fluid simulations as well, that's where you would have your fluid simulation of interaction with the object and all of that. For the real time that I'm doing right now, I don't do any of that because essentially you have to do everything twice. You have your high poly proxy right here. And let me just give this a different color so that it's easier to see. I'll just make that pink and make this, well, blue. Bluer. Blue or blender. Oh my God. There we go. Okay. You have to do everything twice, where this high poly proxy ocean is sitting just barely above your normal ocean, which is the blue object. And then you have your actual object sitting here that you're wanting to animate. Let me get rid of this lamp. So at this point, it's a lot of work, and you're always going to run into issues unless you use like a complicated array modifier or another way of extending it. You're always going to run into issues of having this line here and where it meets up with the extension plane, which is what this is. So instead of using a high poly ocean, I just cheat. I love cheating. If the results look just as good, which based off of the feedback of my real-time footage that I've showed off so far, everybody loves the footage. If the footage looks great, then it doesn't matter if it's not quote-unquote professional or anything. So what I do, I'm just going to leave the principal BDSF there. I'm going to add in a noise texture. Plug that into the normal. Wait for Blender to have a spasm. There it goes. And then I'm going to add in a bump between both of those. Bump. Wait for it to have another spasm. Okay. And come into orthographic view because that might help me out. And also do this. Let me change this back to white because it's going to mess with my ability to see right now. Okay. And I'm trying to get the whole thing in the frame. There. So just like we did with the HDRI, I'm going to need a texture coordinate node and a mapping node. You'll see why in one moment. Mapping. There we go. And generated to vector and vector to vector. Wait for Blender to load everything over here. There it goes. And now we can play around with stuff. So come back into my camera view, and that's decent. This is about an average looking shot out of my real time, so I'm going to keep this. The one thing that I do want to do is I'm just going to turn the roughness down. I'm going to turn the metallic up for the time being. I'm not going to leave it there just because I need to see what's going on. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be creating waves with the noise texture. They're not going to be actual 3D waves. It's going to be kind of like a bump map and a texture for a video game. It's going to create the illusion of 3D depth without actually having to do it. And it also renders a lot faster as well. So I'm just going to mess with the scale, and you can see the HDRI down there just kind of having a field day, really. I'm just going to bump this to anything above 200 is going to kind of cause a problem. So I'm just going to put this on 200. And that still does not look anywhere near what I need it to. And that's because the ocean is so large. So if I come up right there, it kind of almost looks like a camo paint, but that's just because of the reflection. I need way more. So thankfully, there is a scale option here. So in the mapping node, I'm just going to set the scale to 5. And that's going to make me not have to use as much scale over here. That is still not enough, so let's go with 10. Still not enough, so I'm just going to select all of these and hit 100. And finally, now we're starting to get sort of where we want to be. And if this is the size of your object, you gotta kind of use a real world reference. I've looked at so much ocean stuff that I kind of have a frame of reference for what looks in scale and what doesn't look in scale. For those of you that don't like have it bored into your brain, just my best suggestion would be to sort of look at real world examples of ships or anything, ocean, waves, all of that, because that's going to help you out a lot. And there we go. I adjusted the scale to 500, and now my scale there is 200. You can also increase the detail, and if I zoom in a little, the detail is just kind of like the sharpness of all of the noise that's going on. The default is 2. I'm going to leave that there for a moment. And now I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to duplicate this and duplicate this and the mapping node. Put the generated to vector, the vector to vector. I'm going to grab all of these, move them over a smidge, and then I'm going to mix RGB. Make sure it's not a mix shader, it's mix RGB. And whenever Blender gets through loading, we'll put the color into that color. I'm going to leave the factor mix on 0.5. La la la, there we go. And for the rotation, there isn't really a Z rotation for a 2D image. It's really just X and Y coordinates. The Z is a 3-dimensional. So I'm just going to put this on 45 and 45. And just for the sake of being able to see what I am working on, I'm going to, for the moment, just focus on this other noise texture right here. I'm going to turn this one down to maybe 100, and I want it to kind of be a soft wave. And I might just mess with the scale here and put this on, let's say 400. Yeah, that'll work. And I'll mix that color back in there and bring that color back into the bump texture. Cool. So the only thing that I want to do now, I only have a couple of things left to do, and this will be my secrets as to how to do big oceans that render very, very quickly. I'm just going to put a keyframe down on frame 1 for the mapping and the location. And then I'll come over to frame 240, make this ending frame 240. Actually 239 because it's going to loop. And then I will put another one down. Same thing. I don't want to change anything whatsoever. And then half of 240 is 120. So I'm just going to go to frame 120. And this, I'm going to move it by 0.01 and 0.01. And what this is doing is it's kind of sliding the texture along the plane. The plane itself is not moving, but the texture is moving on the plane. And since we move that in a positive direction, I kind of want to move this in the opposite direction. So negative 0.01 and negative 0.01. And now if I press play, you'll see we have movement. The movement is not good, don't get me wrong. It's not very good, but it is moving. So I think it would be better if I actually increased that. So let's do 0.1, and instead of 0.01, let's do 0.1. That is 0.1, not 0.12. Me and my fat fingers. Negative 0.01. There we go. And I can just delete that single keyframe. And now we actually have movement. So this is sort of like a loop, essentially. And you have two textures that are moving in opposite directions. And you can change, like this is moving at the opposite direction of that one. You can change it to like 66, 66. And then it really starts to break it up, because the human mind is really good at picking up patterns. So that's one of the bad things. So about doing any sort of animation whatsoever is like trying to trick the human brain. Once you can get to that point, you're golden. So if you don't want to have a loop like this where it just constantly loops, let's say you're like me and you are in the process of just doing an insanely long animation. There is no way that you want to sit there and torture your computer with a 2-hour and 40-minute long fluid simulation or ocean modifier simulation, and you're looking at something like this, which is just going to be simplistic. I have the solution for you. I'm going to come in and Alt-I remove those keyframes. And what I did, I'm going to do the same thing sort of, but I'm just going to not do 5 minutes worth. What I did was I created a 5-minute loop of animation where it just continues onward and onward and onward. And I'll show you how to do that right now, but I'm just going to do a 10-second one. So again, I'm just going to come in and 0.01, 0.01, and then 0.01, enter. And the ocean is going to be barely moving at this speed, but that's because it's a long animation. So what I do want to do is I make sure that I have both of these mapping nodes selected. You can just select one of them by clicking on it and then hold down the Shift key, select the other one. Then go into your graph editor, which seems to scare a lot of new Blender users, but it's very powerful. All right, let me location. Okay, so I don't, again, we're not messing with Z, so I can turn Z off. And I'm just going to mess with this for the moment. Select that. So this is one of our movements. And this animation, you can tell, it starts off very slow and then it moves. And then towards the end of it, it starts slowing down again before finally coming to a complete stop. We don't want that. We want it to keep on moving. So with your keyframes selected, they should already be selected just by you popping over into here. We're just going to change it to linear, or not linear. I keep getting these mixed up. Extrapolation. So channel, extrapolation, linear. And you'll see now that the keyframes just continue and continue and continue and continue. They also move at a constant speed. There's no obvious start and stop to them. So that way, if, for example, you were like me and you just came over here and extended this sequence to be multiple thousand frames long, the ocean is still going to be moving just like it's supposed to be moving. So now let's do that with the other mapping node, which is this one. Same thing, we're going to go to channel, extrapolation, linear. And now they move. And how do you do all of the rippling? Well, essentially just what I did here. I do the same thing with the scale and the roughness on the noise textures. I add in a keyframe here and I have it slowly over time move up to like 1.1, and then I do a loop where it goes back down to 100. Same thing up here. I have it looped to where it'll slowly do this over the course of an animation, and then it'll go right back down to where it was. You don't want to have these whenever you're done keyframing them. Let me just show you an example of why that's a really bad idea to do it the way you kind of have to do a loop. So if I put this back on 200 keyframe, and if I put this on 100 keyframe, and then if I come over to frame 240 and I change this to 101, because this is kind of like our thing that's breaking up all of the monotony. And then if we change this to, I don't know, 210, right? And we plop down a keyframe and we make sure both of our textures are selected. We go over to the graph editor. There's our scale, there's our scale. If we make both of these things linear, they are going to continue to scale. So that's bad when you're messing with scale. And I'll show you why. Right now, everything kind of looks great. The colors don't look great, but I mean, just the overall look of the ocean and the ripples, they look great. But the problem is, every 10 seconds from now on, the scale is going to get increasingly smaller for the waves. So by the time you get multiple minutes into your animation, look at the size of the waves now. Now they're like microscopic. So you absolutely do not want to put the extrapolation there. What I would suggest you do, since this is a 10-second long animation, is what I did with my real time. But mine is like a 5-minute long loop instead of a 10-second loop. So I'm just going to move this to, let's say, G500, just to make it a little bit longer. I'm going to come over to the starting keyframes here, and I'm going to select them. Shift D to duplicate them. And then I'm just going to move them over. And now you've created a loop. They move and they get a little bit smaller, and then they move back to their original scale. And then the loop will start over and over. All you have to do from this point is select all of the keyframes, interpolation, or channel, extrapolation, make cyclic. You only have 3 keyframes to make, and as you can see, this, if I just play it, the loop is going to continue on and on and on and on and on. Now, as you can see, the problem is matching the speed of this loop with what you're going for scale-wise. So right now, this is way too fast. So instead of undoing the curve and undoing the loop, just scale it. So with everything selected, scale on the x-axis, so SX. Scale it by 5. And that's not enough, so scale it by 5 again. And now all of a sudden, you have much slower, calmer looking waves. That's the secret to doing a big ocean with a potato computer. For the let me turn this. Oh, wait, it's over here. Metallic. Turn that off. I don't want metallic. Blender is going to have a fit. There it goes. So what I normally do, I already have an HDRI in this scene. So if I just turn the view on, this is the default material. I haven't messed with anything other than messing with the roughness. I am going to add in a glass texture. Put that right there. Delete the principled. Take the normal of the bump, plug it into the normal of the glass. And now you're going to run into a little bit of a problem of being able to see like the country roads and everything of the HDRI under there. But now we have a plane that properly reflects the lighting of everything around it. And the ocean looks pretty darn nice, but it can look better. It can always look better. Index of reflection for water is 1.33. If anyone tells you any different, they are wrong. There is no if, ands, or buts. Add another shader. Glossy shader. Okay. Next, add in a mix shader. not a mix RGB, mix shader. We now have two shaders here. We need to mix them with this shader. So plug that into there. Wait for Blender to do its thing. Blender has done its thing, and now we can't see anything, but that's all right. Turn the roughness all the way nearly down to 0. Just barely. And then, oh my God, Blender, change this to black. Same with this, change it to black, nearly black. If you want to have your ocean have a tint to it, maybe like you're making a sea foam or like an alien world, you can change it to whatever you want. And then the last thing really is to add in a plane. Move it down, and then scale it up. Scale it, scale it, scale it, scale it. You want to make sure that it's at least covering a larger size than your ocean itself. There. Now, in Eevee, you have to bake in the lighting. Otherwise, it's going to look horrible. Like, sort of like this is, you can still see the greens of the roads and stuff down here, even though this plane should be, well, the plane that we just added right here should be blocking all of the light coming through. Eevee doesn't quite work that way. But if I pause the animation, come over to cycles, GPU, there you go. You have a decent looking ocean. What is with these black tear looking areas? I have never seen those before. It must be a visual artifact glitch or something, because this is the exact setup that I used. Yep, that's what it is. That's what it is. I'm going to scale this up just a little bit. That's that first extrusion that we made. Yep. That's what it was. But there's no way that I can play this right now because it cycles and it's trying to calculate each frame as I move. But that is a quick, easy, cheap, cheater way of making a big ocean in Blender without killing your computer. And if you want a reference of how fast this is, you join the area, come into camera view. I am in cycles. I'll come over to the rendering tab. I'll leave the samples on 4096 just to give you a baseline of what I am dealing with. Where's 4K? And I'll do 4K instead of 1080p. Hardly anybody does 4K animations. I'll show you just how fast this actually is. So I'm going to hit render. One minute and 5 seconds. So let me just switch over to slot 2. Now, nobody is going to really render at 4096 samples. I usually render between 200 and 500. 500 is what I'm rendering the real time at right now. So I'll just do that. 500 tiles at 4K. There you go. 29 seconds. The denoising took 10 seconds, so if you can get away with turning the denoising off, this thing will render in 19 seconds. That's how I do my oceans. I hope that helped y'all out. If you liked, like, comment, and subscribe. Stick around for more videos, and until then, I'll catch you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.